As the rain pounded Tannoy Temple, Emily Johnson, clung to Sarah's tiny hand, whispering, "I'll find you," while my parents, hearts shattered, handed her and newborn Henry to strangers. Would I ever see them again? That moment, etched in my 6-year-old soul, was a wound that never healed. It was 1977, and our family, part of the Min On theater troupe, was unraveling in the muddy chaos of Lai Thieu, Vietnam. The betrayal wasn't just the world's cruelty, it was the gut-wrenching choice my parents made, trading their children for survival. I'm 54 now, but the memory of that day claws at me, a raw, throbbing ache that demands I tell this story. I was born into a family of dreamers. My dad, William Johnson, was a guitarist with a laugh like a summer storm, loud and warm. Mom, Mary, sang like she was pouring her heart into the sky, her voice carrying us through the troupe's late-night rehearsals. We were nomads, hauling our props and costumes across Vietnam, performing for villagers who paid in rice or applause. The Min On troupe was our universe: singers, dancers, cooks, and kids like me, Sarah, and later Henry, all crammed into a creaky bus, chasing the next show. I loved it, the smell of grease paint, the twang of Dad's guitar, the way Sarah, barely 3, would mimic Mom's dance steps, her pigtails bouncing. But in 1977, that world collapsed, and the betrayal of circumstance tore us apart. Lai Thieu was where it all fell to pieces. We'd been on the road for weeks, but the rains came, relentless, turning dirt roads to rivers. Shows got cancelled, villagers couldn't trek through the mud, and we couldn't afford to perform for empty seats. The troupe's money dried up, and so did our hope. Dad's guitar stayed silent, Mom's songs turned to whispers. We ended up at Tannoy Temple, a crumbling stone shelter that smelled of mildew and despair. The troupe scattered, some heading to cities, others to farms. Our family, Mom, Dad, me, Sarah, and baby Henry, stayed, huddled under a leaking roof with a dozen others, all of us too broke to move on. Hunger was our constant companion. I remember the gnawing in my belly, sharp as a blade. We scavenged like ghosts, picking rice grains from harvested fields, boiling weeds that tasted like dirt. One night, Dad caught a frog, its legs twitching as he dropped it into a pot. Sarah cried, too young to understand, and I hugged her, promising we'd eat better tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Mom was weak, her face pale after giving birth to Henry just weeks before. He was so small, his cries barely audible, wrapped in a frayed blanket. I'd rock him, singing Mom's lullabies, but my voice shook. We were starving, and the temple's walls couldn't shield us from the truth. We were falling apart. The betrayal hit me hardest when I overheard Mom and Dad whispering late one night. I was curled up on a mat, pretending to sleep, Sarah's head on my chest. "We can't keep them all," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Sarah's wasting away, and Henry. He won't make it." Dad's silence was worse than words. I wanted to scream, to beg them to fight harder, but I was just a kid, powerless against the world's weight. They decided to give Sarah and Henry away, to families who could feed them, clothe them, give them a chance we couldn't. It felt like a knife in my heart, not just their choice, but the betrayal of our family's bond, the promise that we'd always stick together, the day it happened. The rain was a roar, drowning out everything but my fear. I held Sarah's hand, her fingers cold and trembling. She was 3, with big eyes and a stubborn streak, calling herself a tiger cub when anyone asked her age. A woman, introduced by Mrs. Lin, the troupe's cook, came for her. She was stern, her basket heavy with rice, her eyes scanning Sarah like she was picking fruit. "I'll take her," she said, and Mom nodded, tears streaming. I whispered to Sarah, "I'll find you," as she was pulled away, her pigtails vanishing into the rain. I believed it then, a fierce, childish vow, but doubt crept in as she disappeared. Henry went next, to a woman named Mrs. Grace, who arrived on a rattling motorbike. Her arms full of rice and clothes. She was kinder, her face soft with pity as she took Henry, still swaddled, his tiny chest rising faintly. Mom kissed his forehead, her sobs shaking the temple's quiet. Dad turned away, his fists clenched, as Mrs. Grace promised to love him. I stood frozen, my promise to Sarah echoing in my head, now stretching to Henry. Would I ever see them again? The question burned, a betrayal of my own heart, because I didn't know if I could keep that vow. That day broke us. Mom and Dad were shadows after, their laughter gone. We left the temple weeks later, joining another troop, but it wasn't the same. I grew up carrying that loss, a weight heavier than hunger. Sarah's giggle, Henry's soft cries, they haunted my dreams. I'd lie awake, replaying that rainy day, hating my parents for their choice, hating myself for not stopping it. The betrayal wasn't just theirs, it was mine, too, for surviving while my siblings were gone. I felt like a traitor to our family. A girl who'd failed to hold us together. Years passed, and I built a life with my husband, David, and our kids. But the hole remained. In 2024, at 54, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pain of that betrayal, the moment my parents chose survival over unity, the moment I let Sarah's hand slip, drove me to act. I reached out to Michael Scott, whose show, Bridges of Love, promised miracles. I told him about Tanloy Temple, about Sarah and Henry, about the rain and the promises I made. My voice cracked, but my resolve was iron. I'd find them, no matter how long it took, to heal the wound of that day, to make our family whole again. The betrayal of 1977 wasn't just a loss, it was a fire that forged me. It taught me that love, even when torn apart, doesn't die, it waits. As I prepared to share our story with Michael, I felt Sarah and Henry out there, somewhere, waiting too. The rain of that temple day still echoed in my bones, but now it carried hope. I was ready to keep my promise, to face the pain, and to fight for the siblings I'd lost. The betrayal of that rain-soaked day in Tanloy Temple, when I, Emily Johnson, watched my parents hand over Sarah and Henry, was a wound that festered for 48 years. At 54, I stood at a crossroads, my heart a battlefield of guilt and longing. I'd promised to find them, whispered it to Sarah's trembling hand, but decades of silence mocked that vow. In 2024, the pain of failing them, of betraying my own heart, pushed me to act. I reached out to Michael Scott, a man whose Bridges of Love show was a beacon for lost souls. That decision, born of desperation, lit a spark of hope, but it also unearthed a new betrayal, the fear that my siblings might not want to be found. The weight of 1977 never left me. I'd built a life with David, my rock of a husband, and our 2 kids, but every birthday, every Christmas, I'd scan the faces in crowds, wondering if Sarah's pigtails had grown into curls, if Henry's tiny cries had deepened into a man's voice. I kept a box under my bed, a faded photo of Sarah dancing, a scrap of Henry's blanket, and a guitar pick Dad gave me before the troop fell apart. Those relics were my anchors, but also my accusers. I'd failed to keep my family whole, betrayed the promise I made as a 6-year-old, and the guilt was a knot in my chest, tightening with each passing year. David saw it eating me alive. One night, as we sat on our porch in Ben Chan, the humid air thick with jasmine, he took my hand. You can't keep living with this ghost," he said, his voice steady like the carpenter he was. "Find them. For you, for them." His words cracked something open, a resolve I'd buried under years of doubt. But the fear was paralyzing. What if Sarah and Henry had new lives, new families? What if they resented us for giving them up? The betrayal I felt wasn't just my parents' choice, it was the possibility that my search might disrupt. I stumbled across Bridges of Love on a late-night scroll, Michael Scott's warm voice promising reunions for families like mine. His show was a lifeline, a chance to rewrite my failure. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the phone. What could I say? We lost them in a temple, in 1977, to strangers whose names we barely knew. My parents, William and Mary, were gone now, their secrets buried with them. I had so little names, a place, a year, but the ache in my soul screamed louder than logic. I dialed Michael's number, my heart pounding like it did when I watched Sarah vanish into the rain. Michael answered on the second ring, his voice like a friend you've known forever. "Tell me your story." "Emily," he said, and I did. I poured out the collapse of the Min on troop, the hunger that drove us to eat frogs, the temple's leaking roof, and the day we gave up Sarah and Henry. My voice broke as I described Sarah's tiger cub pride, Henry's faint cries, and my whispered promise. I told him about Mrs. Lynn, the cook who connected Sarah to her new family, and Mrs. Grace, who took Henry with a sack of rice. I don't know if they're alive, I admitted, but I have to try. Michael listened, his silence a balm, and promised to share my story. As I hung up, hope flickered, but so did dread. What if this led nowhere, or worse, to rejection? That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out the box. Clutching Sarah's photo and Henry's blanket, their edges worn from years of my touch. I saw Mom's face, pale and tear-streaked, as she kissed Henry goodbye. I saw Dad's clenched fists, his back turned to hide his pain. Their betrayal, choosing survival over family, had shaped me, but now I faced my own, the risk of betraying Sarah and Henry's new lives by dragging them back to our broken past. I cried into David's shoulder, my sobs muffled by the hum of cicadas. What if they hate us? I whispered. He held me tight, his calloused hands steady. You're giving them a chance to know you, Em. That's love, not betrayal. The next day, Michael's show aired. I sat on our couch, David's arm around me, our kids watching wide-eyed. My story unfolded, grainy photos of the troupe, a sketch of Tanloy Temple, my voice trembling through the speakers. I braced for silence, for another dead end. But then, my phone buzzed. It was Michael, his voice electric. Emily, a man named Henry Carter called. He thinks he's your brother. My heart stopped, the room spinning. Henry, raised by a woman named Mrs. Grace, had grown up knowing he was adopted from Litheu in 1977. His adoptive mother, now 70, remembered taking a newborn from a temple, from parents named William and Mary, in a troop too poor to feed him. I gripped the phone, tears streaming. Is it him? I choked out. Michael's voice was gentle but firm. The details match, Em. He was 18 days old, just like you said. Mrs. Grace is still alive, she's a witness. The coincidences were uncanny, the year, the place, our parents' names. But doubt gnawed at me. What if Henry had a happy life, a family who loved him? Was I betraying him by pulling him back to us? The turmoil was a storm in my chest, hope clashing with fear, love tangled with guilt. I thought of Henry as that tiny baby, his cries barely audible. Had he grown up wondering about us, or had he moved on? Michael arranged a call with Henry. His voice, deep and measured, hit me like a wave. I always knew I was adopted, he said. Mrs. Grace told me about the temple, the troop. I want to meet you, Emily. His words were a lifeline, but they also stung. He'd lived a life without us, built on the ashes of. Henry's voice on the phone, steady yet searching, cracked open a door I'd thought locked forever, but the spark of hope it ignited burned with a traitor's heat. I, Emily Johnson, was 54, still haunted by the rain-soaked betrayal of 1977, when my parents gave up Sarah and Henry at Tanloy Temple. Now, in 2024, with Henry Carter's call promising a reunion, I faced a new betrayal, the fear that finding Sarah might unravel her life, just as I risked disrupting Henry's. Michael Scott's Bridges of Love had brought Henry to me, but as I clutched Sarah's faded photo, my heart screamed for her, too. Then, a cousin's message from California lit a new fuse, pulling me deeper into a storm of hope and dread. Henry's call had left me reeling. His story, adopted at 18 days old by Mrs. Grace, raised with love but always wondering about his roots, matched ours like a puzzle piece. Yet, the joy was laced with guilt. I'd survived while he and Sarah were given away, and now I was dragging him back to a family fractured by desperation. What if he resented us? The betrayal I felt wasn't just my parents' choice to prioritize survival, it was my own, for daring to hope when I might hurt him. David, my husband, saw the torment in my eyes. You're not betraying him, Em, he said, his voice firm as we sat in our Benchan kitchen, coffee mug steaming. You're giving him truth. But truth was a blade. And I feared cutting too deep. As we planned to meet Henry, my phone pinged with a message that stopped my heart. My cousin Lisa, living in San Diego, had seen Michael's show. There's a woman in Injong named Sarah Thompson, she wrote. Born 1975, adopted from a theater troupe. She mentioned a temple and a woman named Lynn. Sound familiar? My hands shook as I read it again. Sarah, my tiger cub, who'd called herself 3, a tiger cub before she was taken. Could it be her? I called Lisa, my voice trembling. She'd spoken to a mutual friend who knew Sarah, a woman who'd grown up knowing she was adopted, her childhood marked by faint memories of a temple and a troupe's chaos. I contacted Michael immediately, my words tumbling out. It's Sarah. It has to be. He listened, his calm anchoring my frenzy, and promised to reach out to Sarah. That night, I couldn't sleep, the box under my bed calling me. I pulled out Sarah's photo, her pigtails frozen in time, and Henry's blanket, its edges frayed from my touch. I saw Mom's tear-streaked face, Dad's clenched fists, and felt the sting of their betrayal anew, choosing to let go when I'd begged them to hold on. But now, I was the betrayer, risking Sarah's peace to soothe my own guilt. What if she'd built a life free of our pain? The thought was a knife, twisting deeper with every heartbeat. Michael called the next day. I found Sarah, he said, his voice bright but cautious. She's willing to talk. My pulse raced as he patched her through. Her voice, soft yet weathered, hit me like a wave. Emily? Is that you? She asked, and I choked back a sob. We talked for hours, her story spilling out. Sarah had grown up in Injong, adopted by a family who told her she came from a troupe in Lithue. She remembered a temple, a woman named Mrs. Lynn, and saying, "I'm 3, a tiger cub," when asked her age. Her life hadn't been easy, odd jobs, a marriage to a man who called her River Driftwood. Mocking her rootless past. I always wanted to know where I came from, she said, her voice breaking. To prove I wasn't just nothing. Her words gutted me. She'd carried the same wound I did, the betrayal of being torn from family, left to wonder why. But my joy at finding her was shadowed by fear. By reaching out, was I betraying her, pulling her into our fractured history? I told her about Henry, about the temple, about Mom and Dad. When I mentioned Mom's lullaby, Moonlit River, Sarah gasped. I know that song, she whispered. I'd hum it as a kid, not knowing why. That connection, fragile yet electric, was a thread tying us together. But it also sharpened my inner conflict. By pursuing this, I might force Sarah to relive a pain she'd buried. Michael proposed a reunion at our home in Ben Chan, where Sarah and Henry could meet us. I agreed, but the weight of betrayal pressed harder. Sarah's life sounded hard, her husband's cruelty a scar I could hear in her voice. What right did I have to stir that up? And Henry, who'd grown up loved by Mrs. Grace, might face questions he wasn't ready for. I was betraying them both, maybe, by chasing a dream of family that might not fit their realities. David found me crying in our bedroom. Sarah's photo in my lap. You're not forcing them, he said, kneeling beside me. They chose to talk. They want this, too. His words were a lifeline, but doubt clung like damp rot. I called Sarah again, needing to hear her resolve. Are you sure you want this? I asked, my voice raw. It might change everything. She paused, then said, I've spent my life feeling like I don't belong. If you're my sister, I need to know. Her courage shamed my fear, but it didn't erase it. Henry, too, was eager, his voice warm when we spoke. Mrs. Grace always said I had a family out there, he told me. I want to meet you, Emily. Their willingness was a spark, but my turmoil roared louder. What if I was leading us all into pain? As Michael finalized the reunion, I stood on our porch, staring at the stars. The betrayal of 1977, my parents' choice, my failure to stop it, had shaped me, but this new betrayal was mine alone. By searching for Sarah and Henry, I was gambling with their hearts, risking their peace for my redemption. Yet, their voices, their shared memories, fanned the spark of hope into a flame. I whispered my old promise, "I'll find you," to the night, praying it wouldn't become another betrayal. The reunion loomed, and I braced for the storm it might bring. The spark of finding Sarah and Henry had ignited a fire in me, Emily Johnson, but it burned with the sting of betrayal, my own, for daring to pull them back to a family shattered in 1977. On July 20, 2024, our Ben Chan home pulsed with anticipation, neighbors crowding our yard like it was a 4th of July barbecue. Michael Scott, the heart of Bridges of Love, stood ready to guide us, but my chest was a war zone. I'd promised to find my siblings, but what if this reunion betrayed their hard-won lives? As Sarah and Henry stepped through my door, their faces mirrors of my own, I faced the ultimate betrayal, the fear that love might not be enough to heal us. The morning was humid, the air thick with jasmine and nerves. David squeezed my hand, his carpenter's grip grounding me as we set up Mom and Dad's altar, their faded photos staring back. I'd lit incense here 1,000 times, begging for Sarah and Henry's return, but now the moment was real, and I was terrified. My betrayal wasn't just the risk of disrupting their lives, it was the guilt of surviving while they were given away, of thriving while they wondered who they were. Neighbors chattered, their excitement a hum, but I felt like I was drowning, each breath heavy with the weight of 48 years. Henry arrived first, tall and broad, his smile soft but his eyes, Dad's eyes, searching. Mrs. Grace, his adoptive mother, followed, her silver hair framing a face etched with kindness. She clutched a faded photo of baby Henry, taken the day she took him from Tandoi Temple. I hugged him, my arms trembling, and his warmth was a shock, like hugging a memory made flesh. Sarah came next, her steps hesitant, her face a mirror of mine, same arched brows, same stubborn jaw. She clutched a small bag, her eyes darting, and when I pulled her into a hug, she whispered, "Is this real?" I nodded, tears spilling, but my heart screamed, "What if I'm stealing your peace?" Her life, mocked as river driftwood, scraping by in Injong, flashed through my mind. By bringing her here, was I betraying her, forcing her to face a past she might want to forget? The neighbors clapped, but my world was just us three, a fragile triangle of hope and fear. Michael ushered us to the altar, where incense curled like ghosts. We lit it together, the smoke stinging my eyes. Henry spoke first, thanking Mrs. Grace for raising him, his voice steady but thick. "Even if the DNA says no, this is home," he said, and I choked back a sob. Sarah's turn came, her hands shaking as she prayed, "Mom, Dad, let me be yours. I've waited so long." Her words were a dagger, her longing matched mine, but I'd had a family, while she'd had only questions. My betrayal burned brighter, I'd lived with love, while she'd fought alone. Mrs. Grace shared her story, her voice soft but clear, recounting the temple's despair, the rice she brought, the promise she made to love Henry. Her photo, creased and yellowed, was proof of that day, and I clutched it, my fingers tracing Henry's tiny face. Michael announced a DNA test, samples taken that morning, results due in a week. But science felt distant, our bond was here, in tears and prayers. He also shared $1,200 in donations from strangers, a gesture that warmed me, though Sarah's attempt to gift him a scarf, which he gently declined, broke my heart anew. She was trying to belong, and I was the one who'd made her question her place. Rain fell suddenly, a soft patter neighbors called heaven's tears. We moved inside, sharing a meal of rice and chicken, laughter mingling with stories. Henry hummed a tune, Dad's old guitar riff, and I flashed back to troop rehearsals, Sarah dancing beside me. But the joy was shadowed. Each smile felt like a betrayal, a theft from the lives they'd built without us. As Sarah laughed with my kids, I wondered, am I enough to make up for 48 years? The reunion was a climax of love, but my turmoil raged, had I betrayed them? Sarah's trembling voice at the altar, pleading, "Mom, Dad, let me be yours," shattered me, Emily Johnson, as we stood in our Ben Chan home on July 20, 2024, rain falling like heaven's tears. That moment, the raw climax of our reunion, bared the betrayal I'd carried since 1977, my parents' choice to give up Sarah and Henry, and my own for daring to pull them back. Henry's vow, even if DNA says no, this is home, and Sarah's desperate prayer exposed my deepest fear, that my search might betray their hard-won lives. Yet, as we laughed over dinner, their faces lit with hope, I glimpsed a new beginning, though my heart still wrestled with the guilt of what I'd set in motion. The reunion's afterglow was a fragile thing. Neighbors drifted home, their cheers fading, leaving our house quiet but alive with Sarah and Henry's presence. Sarah stayed a few days, her laughter weaving into my kids' chatter like a song I'd forgotten. She played tag in the yard, her grin wide, but I caught her staring at Mom's photo, eyes wet. Had I betrayed her, dragging her from Njong's struggles to face our family's ghosts? Henry, a sound engineer with Dad's knack for music, promised to teach my son guitar, his fingers tapping rhythms that echoed our father's. But his easy smile hid questions I feared answering. Had I disrupted his life with Mrs. Grace, who'd raised him with love? Mrs. Grace became our matriarch, her strength a bridge between past and present. Over tea, she shared stories of Henry's childhood, his first guitar, his quiet curiosity about his roots. I always knew this day would come, she said, her hand on mine. Her grace eased my guilt, but not entirely. The betrayal I felt wasn't just my parents', it was mine, for surviving while Sarah and Henry were cast adrift, for thriving while they searched for belonging. The DNA test loomed, results due in a week, and though our bond felt certain, I dreaded the slim chance it might unravel us. We planned a second reunion, inviting cousins and aunts to celebrate once the results arrived. Sarah, hesitant at first, agreed to stay for it, her voice firm. I want to know my family. Henry nodded, his eyes bright. Let's make it a party of music, food, the works. Their resolve was a bomb, but my turmoil churned. By pulling them here, had I betrayed their right to a life unburdened by our past? David, ever my anchor, saw my struggle. You gave them a choice, he said, his voice steady as we washed dishes. They chose you. His words were truth, but guilt was a stubborn stain. The DNA results came 7 days later, a call from the lab that stopped my breath. They're your siblings, the technician said, and I sobbed, relief flooding me. Sarah and Henry were mine, not just in heart but in blood. Yet, the reunion had already sealed us, those tears at the altar, Henry's hummed tune, Sarah's laughter. The test was a formality, a nod to science, but our love was the proof. Still, I wrestled with my betrayal. Sarah's hard life, Henry's unanswered questions, had I opened wounds I couldn't heal? Their joy suggested otherwise, but doubt lingered like a shadow. One afternoon, we gathered in the yard, Sarah, Henry, my kids, and me. We planted a tree, a young mango sapling. Each of us adding soil. For our roots, I said, my voice thick. Sarah's hands trembled as she packed dirt, Henry's steady beside her. Neighbors cheered, their voices a chorus, and for the first time, I felt the betrayal's grip loosen. This was our new beginning, a family reborn not just from pain but from choice. Sarah stayed a week, Henry visited often, and Mrs. Grace joined Sunday dinners, her stories knitting us tighter. Reflecting now, I see the miracle, Michael Scott's show, a cousin's tip, a community's love. The betrayal of 1977, my parents' desperate act, wasn't the end, it was the start of a story that led us here. But I wonder, can love repair what loss broke? I've found my siblings. But the cost haunts me. What do you think, when you chase a promise, is it worth the risk of betraying those you love most? Share your thoughts, because I'm still learning what family truly means.